fondue pot, Lydia?
Well, this was my grandma's. I'm actually not using that one. The one I have is on my stove, but I do have a small collection. This one is it's harder to use on the stovetop because it's not stainless steel, but these dance ones I think look the cutest.
Mm-hmm.
A little like signature.
Yeah, my mom had one kind of like that with the mustard color.
Yeah, they come in different colors, and then this one has this like stand that comes with it that I love for the little fondue forks.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually, I have friends in cheese who collect fondue pots, and it's an item you can very often find at like Village Discount or Goodwill. So, something you can usually get if you're not too particular about what style, what make, you can usually get one for pretty cheap.
Absolutely. If some people, those who are married tend to get one at their weddings, and it's probably been in the closet for a while. And, in fact, I ran across mine downstairs in the basement yesterday, and I was like, oh, I should really pull out my fondue pot sometime soon. So I have one though doesn't seem to work as well for cheese as it does for meat. So I should get myself an enamel one too. Probably better. So please keep your microphones on mute when you come in. We're going to wait just a moment as we've got people arriving right now. So we always give people just a little bit of time. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We've got a lot of people coming today. This is exciting. I'm seeing lots of new names too, so. Oh, this is perfect, Friday.
Yeah.
Hi, Claire. Aw, thanks, Claire. We're glad to have you join us. Yeah, Renee, now that you've got the recipe, hopefully you can find those cheeses, and we can definitely have Lydia suggest some other ones at the end that she might recommend if you're having trouble finding those. But it is about that time, so I think we are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Happy Friday. I hope you guys are all excited for the weekend. We're going to be wrapping up this week with a Friday cheese fondue class with Lydia Burns, who is, she has expertise in specialty foods, so cheese is definitely her forte. And I'd like to welcome you all to the Taste Talks. I do see a lot of new faces in here today, so we're so excited to have you join us. My name is Christine Duke. I'm the Continuing Education Program Manager at Kendall College at National Louis University. And I created the Taste Talks as a way for us at this time to kind of get together and have some education and entertainment in these quick kind of demonstration style sessions. And we have different topics every single week and culinary and hospitality field. So the next week's schedule is being worked on, but there's some exciting things that are going to be happening, such as kombucha and the ever popular Thirsty Thursday, of course. And there's also kimchi dumplings that's going to next week. So the email on next week's schedule will be going out this weekend. If you are not on the mailing list or have not received anything and want to reassure that you are on the mailing list, please email taste@nl.edu and I will put you on there so that you can get everything. But I am going to turn it over right now to Lydia Burns, who is going to guide us through cheese fondue.
Hi, happy Friday. So fondue is a great activity while we're stuck at home. It's really easy to make, contrary to a lot of popular belief. There are a lot of different recipes and methods. Today I'm focusing on where I believe cheese fondue originated, which is the Alps. And so when I say the Alps, a lot of people automatically think of Switzerland, which I'd say is pretty synonymous with fondue. It's definitely seen more prevalent in the Swiss part of the Alps as well as the French part of the Alps. But when I refer to the Alps, and you'll see cheeses on the recipe that's provided, Alpine culture is the entire socioeconomic landscape of the Alps is built around the production of cheese. So when I talk about Alpine cheese, I'm talking about those cheeses made in the Alps. So that can be made in France, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Northern Italy. All of these are countries that are part of that Alpine culture. And most of the cheeses listed in that in the recipe are from those areas. There's a couple I left out. I realized I left out the Italians. Fontina Valdosta is a great younger Alpine cheese, so that is something you could use for that first category of cheese. You can usually also find aged versions of that, but typically the one you'll find in like a Whole Foods or grocery store is going to be of the younger variety. So that's the tradition of fondue we're making today. That being said, you can really use this recipe as a base and then substitute in other cheeses. Like my mom and my grandma really love fondue, and they always use cheddar. So grandma really loves that tang from cheddar. So I would say that in the recipe you would substitute the cheddar in place of the second cheese, the more aged cheese, because that tends to be what most cheddars fall under unless you have a really young, mild cheddar. But in this case, you're still gonna want a mild cheese for half of the mix, and then a more flavorful, robust cheese for the other half of the mix. So that recipe in the Alps is called moitié-moitié, which means half and half. So that is just referring to half of the cheese being younger, gonna give it a lot of that stretch and really unctuous texture. And then the other half, the more aged cheese, is where you're gonna get some more of that robust flavor. Now, sometimes people think, oh, well, I really like intense flavor, so I want to use all of the aged cheese instead. You can definitely do that. The only issue sometimes is that the texture sometimes suffers a little bit because of the aged cheeses and the way the proteins and the amino acids break down through the age. You might know that sometimes if you've had a really nice aged Gruyere, there's little crystals in it. So that structure is just different. So sometimes it is a little bit more prone to breaking. And what I mean by breaking is that you'll get a layer of oil separating from on the top of the fondue. Now there's technically nothing wrong with it. It is completely edible. Some people, again, like I said, if you like a stronger flavor, prefer that. It just, texturally, the traditional fondue tends to have a really creamy, well-incorporated texture. So you might kind of suffer the texture a little bit if you go that route. But again, it's totally up to you. This is really just a really open-ended recipe that you guys can play with and tweak to your own liking. So a couple of things that are really important. I've already pre-shredded the cheese. I'll use my little guy here. So I've altered the recipe. I'm making it for me and my neighbor today. So I've cut everything in half. So I shredded 1/4 pound of each of the younger cheese and the more aged cheese. And another thing we talked about in the last cheese demo, if you were here, much like when you're serving cheese for fondue and melting, you also want to temper the cheese. I recommend maybe you grate it first and then let it sit out, because sometimes if the cheese has sat out a little bit, it might stick to the grater a little bit more. But it also doesn't matter too much, just makes a little bit more cleanup. And I just used a traditional box grater to grate this. I used the larger side that you often use for when you're baking things with cheese. So the next step is really important. So we add cornstarch. In my case, I'm doing 1 tablespoon. If you are doing the full recipe, you're gonna wanna do the 2 tablespoons. I have that measured out here. Just to stick to my bowl. You wanna make sure you get it all. And some purists don't like to use cornstarch, but I can tell you again, if you want that really smooth, even texture, this is gonna make sure that the mixture doesn't break, and just really helps ensure that it happens and turns out pretty. This is like the fail-proof step. Again, some people like to omit it. Some people use flour. That's okay too. I find the cornstarch works a little bit better. But if you don't have it, flour is a good substitute. Just something that will help it bind. So I'm just gonna mix it until it's totally incorporated. You can see here, there's no like residual powder on the bottom. So that's that. So again, with this traditional fondue, cheese selection is really important. That's why I did list so many cheeses and so many options. But I would say that most of those cheeses, in particular Gruyere and Comté, are really easy to find in grocery stores. And most of them do carry a young and an older version. So usually the young, they're not always listed in that manner of young and mature, but if you ask someone at the counter, they should be able to say it, or often it's written on the label somewhere if you just kind of dig a little deeper. Like I know Mariano's has Gruyere. They have like kind of just a younger Gruyere, which will just be their basic Gruyere, and they carry a really great Gruyere called 1655, and that would be your more mature Gruyere, the one you're gonna use for flavor. And then also, again, if you guys are based in Chicago, some local shops that have some really great Alpine cheeses, and mongers who, if you call in orders, would definitely be able to help you out to pick a younger and an older Alpine cheese. We have Beautiful Rind, which is brand new in Logan Square. We have L&M Foods up in Lincoln Square, which is where I got the cheeses for today. And in case you're curious, I am using Bloom Queso as a younger cheese. It's not as young as I would like it to be, but it was the youngest one I could find. It's about a 6-month age Alpine that has hay and grasses sort of pressed on the outside of it. I can kind of show you guys here what the rind looks like. Obviously, for these purposes, doesn't really matter because it's not going in. And then the second cheese I used for flavor is one of my all-time favorite Alpine. You can kind of see the label here. This is called Hallerhocker. And this is a cheese from the Swiss part of the Alps. It's made in the region where Appenzeller is made. So this is eastern Switzerland near Lake Constance, right near the Austrian-German border. And this one just has a ton of savory flavor. So I've actually never made fondue with it. So it'll be a fun experiment for today. So once you have your cheese all tossed up, we're gonna move to the stove. So this should be fun.
Field trip.
We'll have to make sure the sound works on this guy. Going to the kitchen.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. All right.
Folks, if you double click on that camera, it'll make it the more prevalent one.
There we go. So the reason I'm not doing it all in here is because it's really crammed up against this wall, and this window sort of makes it bad. But bear with me for a couple minutes, and then we'll go back to the other setup. So I have a fondue pot on the stove. Or you can find some good ones online, not too expensive. There's a Dutch company named Bosca that makes some really cool ones. They make smaller versions too, and they're not too expensive. The traditional ones, like this Swiss one, they tend to be pretty pricey, but again, they're made out of cast iron, so it's essentially just a cast iron pot. So you can kind of, if you do go that route, it also just makes a good pot. Very important, at least according to the Swiss, is that you use the wooden spoon to serve your pot. So I have a garlic clove here, cut in half, and you're just gonna rub the inside of the pot with it, sort of get that flavor in. Some people throw it in there. I was taught to just rub the pot with it, so leave it at that. Then have a wine. In my case, I am using a little bit. I do it a little bit more than half a cup. Like I said, if you're doing it for 4 people, you're going to be using the full cup. And I'm going to heat this on the stove until it comes to a boil. I usually don't want to heat it too high, just because once you do start adding the cheese, you're going to take the temperature down a bit. So because it is cast iron, I don't want to get it hot too much. And then just let it come to a gentle boil. There is no oil. Actually, the pots should be good in and of themselves, and there's enough fat in the cheese that adding oil actually just additionally can add to breakage. There are fondue recipes that do call for oil. This traditional recipe does not. We're going to let that come to a boil. I'm going to talk a little bit about wine selection. So the philosophy behind this traditional fondue from the Alps is, since there are so few ingredients, that all the ingredients you choose matter. So that's why what cheese you use is really important, because that's 90% of the flavor. And then also, I would argue the flavor of the wine is really important. To me, the most important part is that it's acidic. Again, that's going to help break down some of the fat in it. So drier wines are better. Sweeter wines don't tend to work as well unless you want to use a fortified wine. So in this case, I'm actually using a sherry, which is a fortified wine. Tends to have a little bit of a nutty flavor, so I really like that. But again, there is a lot of acidity in a sherry. You can also use a nice white Fondue. For white wines, traditional ones from the region, a French one would be Jura white, which has a little bit of oxidization, a little bit of funkiness. That's any white made from the Sauvignon grade. But they can be a little bit pricey and difficult to find. There's also a really great Swiss white wine called Chasselas. Also a great one. Again, can be hard to find though. So if you just want to look for a decent bottle, I would say, like again, not too, doesn't have to be crazy expensive, but something I would recommend using in the fondue and then drinking along with it. So something that you wouldn't mind drinking yourself. Dry, acidic white wine. I would definitely avoid anything too fruity. So Sauvignon Blanc is not the best option usually. But something like a Muscadet from France or a Pinot Grigio, something on the drier, more acidic end of the scale.
And
some great Spanish wines that are really affordable, whites that can also do the trick. So,
and then Lydia, would you also say if it's not a wine that they really enjoy to drink, that they shouldn't really be cooking with it either?
The what?
That if they don't really enjoy drinking the wine, would you not recommend using it?
For the case of this, yeah, I would say, I mean, some people say it doesn't matter what wine you cook with, but because this is one of 2 ingredients in here, the wine does add a lot of flavor. So, like, that's usually my idea, is you use a cup in the recipe, and then you should enjoy the wine enough to want to drink it along with it. So I've started to add the cheese, because the wine came to a boil. I'm going to reduce this heat, and I'm going to just keep adding 1 handful of cheese at a time, and I'm stirring it. I'm not so good at multitasking, but just going to keep stirring it in as it melts, and then adding another handful so you kind of get it all in there. But it's important to do it in steps. You try to do it all at once. That's when a lot of times when it ends up breaking, and you can see they're sort of like solid masses, and they will quickly break down, especially if you get that wine coming to a boil before you add it. But it is important to reduce it to like a medium low as you start adding the cheese. This is really this is the nuts and bolts of it. You're just gonna keep adding it, stirring it constantly. Again, I'm not sure it's important. I think you could use a spatula, but the Swiss do claim that the wooden spoon is very important.
Lydia, how high should the flame be?
So to bring it to a boil, I usually do it on medium, and then once the wine starts to fizzle, I reduce it to medium low.
Okay.
So mine's on low right now because, again, I'm using stainless steel or cast iron, so that really transmits the heat. If you're using like an enamel pot, you might want to keep it a little bit like more towards medium, but just enough so the cheese continues to melt, but not too quickly that it breaks. So essentially, the cheese should be melting in like 5 or 6 stirs. You should really see it all dissipate. And then just gonna keep stirring this. Now that I've added all the cheese, get every last drop, very important. And break down the sides of it. And see, really a couple little bits left, and do it. You don't want to cook it too much because then it does sit on the burner on the fondue pot. So, but you want to make sure all of the cheese is melted. You got a nice little view. I think it should see how it's kind of coating that spoon. That's how I like it. All right, let's go back to the other setup. Bear with me a second. Technology. All right. We've got that guy. Then, very important, gotta light this guy. We'll see if this works. My God, does not always, these do not always like to light. I'll keep working on that. And then lastly, garnish. Again, it kind of depends on what wine you're using. Like I said, I did use a fortified that tends to give it a little bit, a touch of nuttiness, a touch of sweetness. I really enjoy fresh nutmeg on top. That's pretty traditional. So you just get a microplane and I grate it on top. But some people prefer to go a little bit more savory. It also depends on what you're eating with it. So you can also do fresh cracked pepper of any variety, really, whatever is your preference. And also in Switzerland, it is not my preference, but a lot of people do finish the fondue with a little touch of kirsch. So if you do want to do that, you just add a dash at the end, and can see this like switch it. You can see this like really, really nice stretchy texture. which is exactly what you're going for. And then it's all really about what you want to dip in it. And like I said, that is totally up to your own creativity. I am pretending like this is healthy, so I roasted some potatoes and Brussels sprouts. I really love Brussels sprouts with cheese fondue. Potatoes are pretty traditional. The most traditional is day-old crusty bread. Don't happen to have any bread right now, so going this route. I also, again, love pretzels. I thought pretzels would be fun. Also, if you have saltines, apples are pretty traditional. There's a lot of different fun things you can find at home, especially now, that you can use. You don't have to use bread. Of course, bread is the most traditional, and I recommend it if you enjoy bread, but I would definitely say you can make do without it if you are having trouble procuring bread right now.
Yeah, it's a good time to kind of like look in the pantry, look in the fridge, see what you need to actually probably eat up or something too.
Right.
So, and I know a lot of people have been baking lately too, so this is a good solution to all that bread you're outputting.
Yeah.
And Allison recommends a lightly steamed broccoli.
Oh yeah, for
That's
sure.
awesome and colorful. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Any kind of veg I think is good to lighten it up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So this has like alcohol soaked in it. It's supposed to catch fire, but apparently it's not working.
It's got stage fright.
Yeah. So I have a backup plan, which is candles, because candles always work.
Mm-hmm.
So usually you can also use a sterno. You can get those at most, like CVS, I think, has sterno.
Yeah, you can sometimes get them at the grocery store too. Yeah, CVS,
Jewel,
Target, Walmart.
work too. It just depends. Most of them have like a little slot for them. Some of them do just take candles, especially the smaller fondue pots. But yeah, and that's just to keep it warm while you eat it. Otherwise, it's not even totally necessary, depending on how fast you're going to eat it. But I'd say for the most part, you're going to want it.
Yes, Renee, thank you. Hardware stores too. There's another great place to get started.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. I mean, that's fondue. It's one of the reasons I like it is because it's so easy. Again, like I said, you can get creative. If you don't, I do recommend trying the traditional Swiss. It's near and dear to my heart. It's where I like learned how to make fondue was in the Alps. So I'm a little bit partial. And I think it's really interesting that here there was this big fondue culture in the 70s, and it's thought of as sort of a luxury food, because I know that they still have like geihas here, and they're kind of expensive restaurants. But in the Alps, fondue is really a peasant dish, because like I said, it is the socioeconomic heart of the Alps, and there are tiny little towns, and every town has a herd that's mostly managed cooperatively, and then a cheese making facility that makes these kind of cheeses. If you're in Germany, Austria, they're called Bergkäse, which means mountain cheese. If you're in Western Switzerland, it's Gruyere. If you're in France, it's Comte. In Eastern Switzerland, there's the Appenzeller, the Emmentaler. But essentially, the culture is all the same. And these are cheeses that are made, traditionally they were made during the summer months and then stored throughout the winter in the valleys where the people lived. And it's really harsh. So people always had cheese in their cellar, and fondue was just a really quick and easy dish they could make with what little they had on hand. So it's kind of interesting now that it's become a bit of a luxury. And even if you go to the Alps, it's definitely become sort of like a touristy thing. You'll find it in the major Swiss cities, and it'll definitely, well, anything is expensive in Switzerland, but it definitely kind of represents itself as more of a luxury item. But traditionally and culturally, this was a really simple peasant food. So,
is there any cheese that should be avoided using for fondues?
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, I would avoid using like a processed cheese. I mean, again, they melt really good, but it sort of defeats the purpose. Although some people do like to throw a wedge of Laughing Cow in there. in their fondue to ensure that it's soft. But like I said, I really think if you use that cornstarch and you get a younger cheese and a more aged cheese, I mean, look at that, you get this like crazy cheese pool. You really shouldn't have any trouble. So you can use it, but I think it kind of cheapens it. You don't need to use it. And like I said, you can use cheddars, you can use something. I would just always make sure that you adhere to one younger, one a little more aged, so that you get that nice unctuous texture. I would maybe avoid anything too aged, like a Parmigiano Reggiano or a really aged Dutch Gouda, the things with the really big crystals, just because those don't break down and melt as well. Certain cheeses are gonna melt better than others, and the Alpines particularly are designed to melt, so.
Okay, and then Faith, I am going to ask your question in one moment, but first, can cider or a hard liquor replace the wine, or could possibly a beer replace it?
Yeah, for sure. So the main, kind of get that stretch effect there, guys. See, that's what you're looking for. This traditional, because their white wine is more prevalent in the regions where this originated, is what it's called for. But again, any alcohol, you're really looking for that acidity. That's going to really help bring those flavors together. So I would say you could use a beer for sure. I would definitely go something, again, less fruity. I would something that has a little bit of bite to it, maybe
like a sour beer, like a Belgian ale.
Yeah, something like that I think would work really well. Again, I use the fortified sherry, so you definitely can use alcohol. Again, I wouldn't use just hard alcohol. You could finish with the kirsch, but sometimes if it's too high proof of an alcohol, you get because it's such a large percentage of the recipe, it'll taste really boozy. Granted, like I said, there might be other recipes you could find that use a smaller ratio of them, or you can finish them like with the kirsch. So I wouldn't use the hard alcohol I wouldn't use a cup of hard alcohol in your fondue. I mean, I guess you could, but if you're going for boozy, I just think it might overpower the cheese a little bit. But I also think, I was thinking about it, if you wanted to avoid alcohol altogether, even though the actual alcohol kind of cooks out, I was thinking you could use probably a verjus, something that's, again, still has that acidity, but then you don't have any of the alcohol in it. Maybe even with like a little bit of lemon juice or something in it. I think that should work as well to sort of help emulsify the cheese. So.
Okay, and then we've had someone ask about chocolate fondue. Are you able to talk a little bit to what that process is kind of like?
Well, I've made it. I would by no means say I'm an expert in it. I know some of the basic principles are the same as cheese. You definitely want to shave or grate the chocolate. Essentially, the smaller the surface area of the bits you're melting, the quicker it incorporates and the less likely it is to break. But in terms of like off the top of my head, I don't necessarily have a chocolate fondue, but I do know that, again, you're going to want to shave it, grate it. Similar principles. I think usually there's a little bit of an acidifier in there too.
I know, that's when I'm like trying to think myself, I can't think of a recipe for it off the top of my head, but I'll actually ask our baking and pastry team and see if we can come up with a chocolate fondue recipe that we can share to everyone as well. Yeah. So if everyone's going to become big fondue fans, we may as well make sure that everyone can get all of the tools they need to have amazing fondue parties. So whether it's for 1, 2, or whatever your household is right now. So, all right, does anyone have any other questions before we wrap it up today? Oh, Carol's asking about meat and seafood fondues.
Oh, the oil or dipping. I mean, traditionally in the Alps, they do tend to dip charcuterie in the cheese fondue. Maybe a dry salami or like a cured ham. There's a speck, which is a smoked cured ham, sort of similar to prosciutto, and they dip that in it. She's speaking to the like Geha style, like oil fondue.
I think she is. So yeah, definitely a different style. So.
Yeah, I mean so in Switzerland, or in the Alps, when they say fondue, they mean cheese fondue. Again, cheese is even though people often think of chocolate as well from Switzerland, for them, like fondue means cheese. I definitely have had the meat fondue. I almost consider that more of like a hot pot sort of, where you're cooking the meat in an oil or a broth. I think it depends on the style or like kind of the culture it derives from, which you're using. But if you have a fondue pot, you certainly can you can do all of those applications, especially if you have a stainless
cast iron
one. The meat ones you might not be able to do in the enamel, especially if you're doing an oil. But if you spring for the cast iron one, you should be able to do all 3 types of fondue.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I think we are all set for today. Thank you so much, Lydia. It's always a pleasure. And I'm a big cheese fan, so I always get excited when we're doing things with cheese. Thank you to all of you who joined us today, and we hope to see you at some more Taste Talks next week. Again, if you have any questions, want to request any upcoming topics, or would like any kind of recipes or anything like that, please reach out to me at taste@nl.edu. And everyone have a fabulous weekend. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lydia.
Thanks.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Now I know what I'm having for lunch.
Yeah. It always makes it so easy. Bye, everyone.